Council. Hey, good afternoon.
Let us know. She's pushed it live now. Okay.
We're not there yet, though.
Okay.
Hasn't gone yet.
No problem. Just let us know when you're ready.
Okay, we're live.
Okay.
Ready to go?
Yeah. Ready.
Okay, I'd like to call the June 1st Town Council meeting to order. Could we have the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Could I have a roll call?
Mayor Manella,
Here.
Cricket,
Here.
Ms. Conley,
Here.
Mr. Moffett,
Here.
Dr. Parker,
Here.
Mr. Johnson,
Here.
Mr. Wilson.
Here.
We have 3 sets of minutes to approve. The first is from our meeting of May the 4th. Well, that seems like a lifetime ago when we were talking about masks and ordinances and the like. Could I have a motion to approve?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on those minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Approved. The second is a special call meeting that was conducted on May the 12th, again on the same subject, masks and restrictions and emergency and permanent ordinances. Could I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And lastly is a special call meeting that took place just last week that was really a public hearing relative to our decision that we'll make today on the budget. So could I have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Mayor's report. Stephanie and your wonderful staff, on behalf of an extremely proud and happy town council, thank you. Thank you for your efforts, your dedication to making that PGA week what it was. All of you guys just did a marvelous, marvelous job.
Thank you. Staff.
I think this whole town is appreciative of the efforts that you made with the PGA, the association, the resort, the sheriff's office, volunteers. It was just wonderful. It just couldn't have gone any better. Phil called. He wanted to be here. He wanted to thank you personally.
Oh, Lord.
No, honestly, it was just a wonderful, wonderful week. And I think you guys demonstrated that how well things can work here. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you. And you're right. It was a huge team effort with Kika, CCSO, the resort. Everyone was basically, we were all on the same sheet of music, and with all the volunteers, I just couldn't believe the operation. So it was
Thank you.
great.
I know how dedicated you were to it. Thank you very much. And a special acknowledgement. This just makes being here so special that we have Wendy Kulik here visiting with us for her last visit. So, Wendy, it has been a privilege for me to have known you for so long and to work with you. You have trained, I don't know how many town councilmen you've trained, but you've trained a lot of us, mayors included. So thank you for your dedication to community service. And I'm
And
just so
staff.
glad you're here. Citizens' comments, agenda items.
Wendy?
Hearing none. Okay.
Nothing?
Maybe the second.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Diane.
You have to go up and state your name and address for the record, please. Yep, at the, yeah.
My name is Diane Castor, and I reside at 43 Salt Cedar. I believe Dr. Parker is my
Yes.
from across the street. I'm not a very good public speaker, but I felt that it was important that I attend this meeting to express my concern regarding the increase in noise pollution on the island that I have noticed, especially since retiring a few months ago. Since I had retired a few months ago, this became more obvious to me on a daily basis. And what confirmed my observation was the quiet observed during the PGA week. The noise from, the lack of noise from the commercial activity, I think, contributed to that. So I'm asking the council to consider restricting commercial work, but especially landscaping work, to weekdays, so that the residents can potentially have an option of respite during the Saturday as they do on Sunday. I feel that this would make a very positive impact on the quality of life for residents as well as the visitors alike. In addition, I think also the traffic volume on the island would diminish as well as on Jones Island as well. I also feel that this would be an opportune time to ask the council to encourage landscapers to consider a transition to electrically operated machinery. I think that obviously that will take a long time. However, I think it is very important to start the process now. The technology has significantly improved. There's much more available machines available. And I think the dual cycle engines that are being used by many landscapers are a detriment not only to them, but also contribute to significant noise and air pollution. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. In terms of your second point, I have received communication regarding that, and we are looking into that.
Okay.
So that has come up.
Can I elaborate on that?
Absolutely.
The mayor has actually tasked me with forming a group to look at ways in which we can become a little bit more green friendly. And as a result, I have approached the Kika, the resort, the Conservancy, and the town. And all of those partners are going to be putting together a group of people to look at various ways in which we can address many of the concerns that you just brought up.
That's great to hear.
Okay.
Thank you.
And you're right, that's going to be a long-term process, though.
Yes.
I do think the suggestion to have this work done Monday through Friday is a reasonable one that we should look into.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for your support.
Okay, very good. Lee? Oh, hi, welcome.
Yes.
You're up.
Yeah.
Well, hello everyone, how are y'all doing today?
Good, Lee. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. So, to anybody that doesn't know me, I work at the Conservancy, Field Conservancy. I'm the Senior Ecological Health and Conservation Coordinator for the Under. And today I've been asked by Town Council to provide some updates on some wonderful research projects we've been doing with town funds. And before I go in, I want to just thank the town ahead of time to say thank you for allowing us the opportunity to get the resources necessary to look into these. And I'm really excited to share with you some of our wonderful sort of products that we've been looking into and some of the work that the graduate assistants at the College of Charleston have put together for us.
Great.
So just some quick updates. So the groundwater table study and the marsh vulnerability study were two projects funded by the town of Kiawah Island back in 2019. We initiated these two studies with town funds and to look into sort of the conditions of the island and sort of how they changed over time. These two projects are funded by the town, and we are consulting with the College of Charleston through Dr. Norm Levine and Dr. Tim Callahan, who have been wonderful and gracious enough to allow us to get graduate assistants to work on this. And I want to share with you some of the information we pulled together from these two projects. And also talk a little bit about our resilience project, because it sort of culminates all of this into one big project to look into how we can look at the restoration and how we can enhance the habitat value of Kiawah Island. So first, we're going to go into the groundwater table study. The first part of the study was looking into establishing around 21 wells on the island to begin our monitoring effort to look into depth and salinity of the groundwater. This is especially important because the maritime forest relies on this groundwater in order to maintain its health. So this was a very important thing to begin to start looking at. And this was based off of recommendations from the Sea Level Rise report produced by the Town's Environmental Committee. And then last year, we proposed a second phase of this project to look into continuing these monitoring efforts, look into what is contributing towards salinity, as well as looking at the relationship between ponds and groundwater. So these are the spreads of the groundwater wells throughout Kiowa Island. We looked into specific conditions, we looked into height, specific geographic spread across the island, as well as the different types of soils on the island because of the hydrologic groups that they're located in, based on their drainage and that sort of thing. And what we're doing with this information is creating these seasonal groundwater tables to allow us to look into where is the groundwater on average in any given time of the year, to kind of give us a picture about what our groundwater resources look like. And then in addition to this, we've installed 3 additional wells across the island, and they're installed within wetland areas as well as ponds in order to understand the relationship between these open water areas, these ephemeral wetlands, and how they sort of contribute towards the groundwater and the freshwater resources on the island. And here's an example of one of those wells. And the way we installed it, we used a 34-pound hammer just to basically hammer these into the ground. And they have holes inside of them to allow water to go in, but allow them to keep stable.
How deep would that be?
For this one, it was only about 4 foot deep underneath the soil. The rest of the wells on the terrestrial areas are 12 foot or lower. So they're a little bit deeper. And in addition to this, we need to make sure that everything we have is accurate. So we want to be able to look at the change in elevation over distances. So looking at those water levels and how they relate. And generally, the groundwater we've noticed stays around about mean high water, but it does fluctuate throughout the year based on rainwater as well as tides, as we've come to realize. So one of the ways we want to do this is, we have done this, is using differential leveling. We have leveling equipment where we have looked at the tops of these wells and how they relate to the other wells on the island and sighting them in using USGS benchmarks. And we've been able to do this on one of the wells, and we're going to do it on the other ones. And this will allow us to get a better picture and better accurate picture of these groundwater wells. Previously, we were using a digital elevation model that was generated by South Carolina DNR and using GPS coordinates. So this will allow us to have a little bit more accuracy in our data. Because it's very important, you know, one of the things we're looking at is how does salt water potentially affect the island, and whether or not, you know, the salts that we have in our fertilizers are affecting the groundwater, as well as whether or not the salts from the seawater coming in underneath the ground are actually affecting the groundwater as well. And this is very important for understanding how saltwater intrusion is going to affect the island, and potentially how it's going to manifest in the future. In general, what we've been able to create now is these maps that allow us to look at how saltwater is influencing the marsh and the terrestrial areas, at least near the shorelines, to understand what we're looking at. So this is what we would look at, you know, saltwater affecting the marshes and the upland areas around low tide in July, as well as high tide in July. So this allows us to get a kind of a picture about what these influences look like. And in general, you know, it was mentioned in the previous figure, and I'll go back real quick. There's this wedge that this salt water affects the groundwater. And you can see this on the marsh edges where you have these sort of stunted growth trees, these shrub thickets. And generally you have the tide kind of pushing back in and out, which affects the water quality. And so we've gone and gotten probes. They're called Vernier Go Direct probes. You can get the data via Bluetooth. And we've been able to collect information based on the nitrates and the chlorides in the water, give us an example or at least a good picture of what either fertilizer or seawater is contributing towards the water. From the most part, we haven't seen high levels of nitrates, which is a good thing. So a lot of the influences do come from seawater, about 99.9% on average for most of ours. But we have noticed that there are specific wells close to the marsh edges that we've noticed that there's a high level of salinity. Specifically near Blue Heron Pond, where we have one of our wells, we actually think we penetrated through the wedge where that salt water is located, and we've actually found it, and the levels in this well are up to 20 parts per thousand, which is about what you would expect in a brackish water marsh. So it's pretty interesting to see this, but you know, places throughout the island have not seen a lot of salinity. You know, some of our wells that we place next to the beach actually do not have a lot of salt water in them. In fact, 6 Eugenia actually has one of the lowest salinity levels that we've seen in measured wells, which is a good sight. So a lot of these impacts actually come from the areas closest to the marsh.
Lee, is there a good and bad? I mean, what are we looking at? Is the lower numbers are good, but you said you're not concerned about the 20 parts, was it PPT parts per thousand?
Yes, sir.
You're not concerned about that being 20, that,
No, and generally I think it would have to be where that water is. So the well at that specific site's about 15 feet down, so a lot of the water in that column actually got influenced by us penetrating through that wedge. In the other areas we haven't been able to, so usually anything below 4 parts per thousand is acceptable for vegetation. Once you get above that, it starts to affect it. You'll start seeing tree die-offs in the canopy. But in this area, there's a lot of pines that are growing everywhere. There's a lot of live oaks that exist right on the marsh edge, actually closer to the marsh than this well. So it just happens to be that we dug too far down.
oh, okay.
So it depends on where that wedge is, and I think that could be another thing to look into in the future. And then moving on, I have some very exciting pictures to show in the marsh vulnerability study, but I'll kind of go back to square one and describe it. So when we started in our first phase, we were looking at historical changes in the marsh by using imagery from years past, and then being able to, we were able to take imagery from previous years using USDA NAEP imagery, which is used for looking at the growing season and how crops are growing and that sort of thing. We took these images, about 8 images from 1977 all the way up to 2019, and we mapped the shorelines and vegetated shorelines in the marshes and looked at how it's changed over time. We've seen some pretty significant effects, and actually the image on the screen here actually shows a visualization of the erosion rates, which are shown in the red marks next to the creek, and the accretion rates, which are shown in the green. And we also were able to catalog the structures near the marsh, including bridges, docks, bulkheads, using information from DHEC as well as some information from Dr. Norm Levine's lab to look into shoreline structures that have been built since the DHEC has updated their information. And in phase 2, we looked into capturing more of the current marsh conditions, sort of looking at what we're currently experiencing, and also looking at conducting additional analyses. One of the things that came up recently in discussions with some of the environmental groups in the area was the use of this thing called UVBR, an unvegetated vegetated marsh ratio. It was developed by a man named Neil Ganju out of the USGS Woods Hole, and it was pushed further by NASA because they wanted to continue using Landsat imagery. So we have conducted that using imagery for Kiawah Island. I'm happy to share that today. We've also been able to capture the vegetative communities at a 1 meter resolution for Kiawah Island, and I'm going to be sharing that with you as well. And to begin, for the first part of the phase 1, we actually had a graduate researcher, Kaylee Smith, who's going to be working on the project going forward. She's also conducting some additional information and additional analyses from phase 1 products, looking into the digital shoreline analysis system developed by USGS to look at the changes in shorelines. Originally, we were looking at the use of an AMBER study, which was used by DHEC, but since the software that currently got updated won't allow us to do that, we have looked into this as a more viable option. This has been used for looking at beach shoreline erosions as well as some more static marsh erosion rates.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but could you tell me exactly what I'm looking at here on this?
Yes, exactly. So, so what you're looking at is the kind of the multicolored line close to the Retz Bluff area, kind of behind your Bass Creek.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the different shorelines that were delineated from the NAEP imagery that we drew out. So those are years between 1977 and 2019. And what they're doing is they're drawing a line, an arbitrary line in the open channel in the Kiawah River, and they're looking at the changes from that line, from each line over years. So this is basically looking at the dynamics of those changes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Lee, what's LRR?
Where is this? Next one?
Strand sec rates 20,
On the-
LRR.
legend.
Oh, I couldn't be able to tell you, but Kaylee would be able to tell you.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
These are just pictures from what she shared with me, and they're still working on kind of getting that figured out. They're in kind of the initial phase of this, so she's still working on that. But she should be able to finish some of that up by the end of the year.
Well, it must be something important because it's greater or less than LRR, so.
Yeah, and it's likely that they're looking at erosion versus accretion in there.
Hmm.
So the negative probably would be the erosion rates, and the positive would be accretion.
Hmm.
But this would be a more technical analysis of those changes. With the previous information right here, it shows us areas where we should be most concerned about the specific areas that would be experiencing the most erosion and the most accretion. And that would be sort of the cause for concern for looking at it from a management perspective. And this would be more of a technical scientific sort of use for statistics purposes.
Lee, at some point, this information, because it's really, of course, it's hard to see for the town, but it'll be available via, I guess, GIS, so we can easily print out maps to be able to see better the erosion versus, and then, I know there's a timeline on hers over time, but I can't tell with the colors, they're so close together in terms of the year and all that, but we'll be able to have access to that at some point.
Yes, absolutely. And now going to.
So Dr. Parker, LRR is linear regression rate. It's the rate of the shoreline change. So it's just an arithmetic measure of the change,
Thank you.
certainly.
All right. So going into
Did you Google that?
Yes. You didn't think I knew that.
So going into the phase 2 products, so you know, as I mentioned, we're looking into a land cover and vegetated ratio to sort of highlight what's in the marsh. But we're also looking at mapping conditions recommended by South Carolina DNR. They recently produced a report in 2019 outlining conditions needed for specific living shorelines projects to go into the marsh in order to enhance habitat and restore habitat. So we wanted to go ahead and map that, be able to have to present to the town in order to bolster natural infrastructure, and being able to get that information is very valuable, especially when you're looking at high dollar figures for looking into marsh restoration. And one of the first things they recommend is looking at boat traffic and how it affects the wave action on shorelines. So there's an automatic identification system that's used for monitoring vessel traffic. So we took all of that data into the GIS systems, and we were able to map out where exactly the highest amount of wave action would happen on the shorelines due to boat activity. And as you can see, we actually broke it down into high, medium, and low levels of boat wake energy, and that'll be very valuable for figuring out what types of projects would survive in sort of these turbulent waters. And then next, we're looking at things like escarpment height, figuring out what is the difference between the height from the exposed marsh at low tide to the highest platform at high tide. So looking at those changes as well as the width. And then finally coming into bank slope. And this is very important for understanding the sedimentation in the marsh and understanding what projects work in specific areas. Specifically, if you try to put in a oyster reef in an area with a high slope, it wouldn't be successful. So this would be very important for figuring out whether or not we need to focus on maybe more marsh vegetation, or maybe we need to focus on more hardened shorelines, that sort of thing. So this kind of gives us more information about what exactly would go in these specific areas. And another really interesting that's coming out of the lab is the aerial cover. So this doesn't just cover the marsh, it actually covers the entire island. And it's at the 1 meter resolution, so it gives us information about the various habitats on the island and how to parse them out. Specifically, I thought it was interesting that they identify areas with black beetle rush, so you're able to look at a heightened definition where those black beetle rush habitats are. And this is especially important for things like studying marsh sparrows, which are on and sort of becoming more endangered and becoming more of a research topic at the federal level.
And the black needle rush is important because it has special properties, is that it?
It identifies some of these high marsh habitats that are more conducive for these marsh sparrows.
And it's the only one that does that?
They're usually more in high marsh habitats. Spartina does exist in the high marsh, but it's a good indicator for it.
Thank you.
And this is another picture out near the eastern end of the ocean course, as well as our conservation easement at Little Bear Island. And you can see it does identify where you have a significant portion of shrub thicket, which is especially important for bobcats. So identifying these areas and being able to parse them out not only helps us kind of figure out what habitats are out there, but also where to pinpoint some of our efforts for restoration enhancement, and also looking at land management purposes. And this is a picture for it across the island, sort of drone into Johns Island, so to cover a good portion of the Key Largo watershed as well. And this is this is the full picture of the unvegetated vegetated marsh ratio, the product that's been produced out of that. What you're looking at is the darker areas where there's a lot of dark blues is where you have more vegetation in the marsh, whereas the areas with the more yellow indicate more sort of open sediment areas, so you have this good mix of that in between there. But what this is telling us is where we should be focused on restoration efforts potentially if we wanted to look at increasing the vegetation in the marsh, which is very important for making sure that we prevent erosion, we make sure we attenuate waves from storm surges, and look at sort of bolstering our habitat for the natural infrastructure purposes. So the areas that are more lighter or more vulnerable to things that are caused on the island, as well as boat action, wave action, storm surges, that sort of thing. And this is kind of a close-up of it. So they're split up into these smaller sections to allow it to be more digestible, and it allows us to look at it from pieces and components within the marsh.
Have you guys taken out, because it seems like in some areas there's a lot of dark blue, and I'm surprised that there's so much vegetation there. Is it picking up the golf courses as heavy vegetation?
No. What they did with this one is they isolated the marsh in order to make sure that they only captured the areas that are at the tides. And I believe that area right there is where a hummock island exists, that specific area, so there would be a high amount of vegetation.
Hummer.
And this is the eastern end of the island. I thought it was important to note, if you look at the eastern tip of Little Bear Island, you see that there's a little bit of like a yellow spot right there, and that's mainly because it's all sand. So it was a good indicator for determining whether or not that this is successful, is looking at these areas where there's a high amount of sand, and which is also in the marsh. A lot of the marsh here is more silt and sand than it is clay. So it's really interesting to see these pictures and kind of understand where our vulnerabilities exist within the marsh, and understand how to go about restoration.
So just taking the big picture here, not this one, the big picture, is it a fair representation to say that towards the ocean course and all that, those marshes are relatively healthy, and on the eastern end of the island, I'm sorry, the western end of the island, they're not as healthy?
Yes, that would be true. And the one thing, we've had some discussions of this. So you have these two tidal influences that come in from the Stono Inlet, as well as Captain Sam Spit. And when they meet together, they sort of churn in a bunch of that tidal water together. And that's the reason why a lot of that area, sort of north of the western part of the island, does look a little yellow. It's because you have a lot of kind of churning of those tidal influences. And that's where a lot of the sedimentation really just kind of gets pushed out. So yeah, that's
Okay.
And we did notice within our phase 2 products that that a lot of the changes in shoreline were significant in this specific area. You could probably measure them to up to about 20 acres of marsh loss, which we would expect. In the past 100 years, we've noticed about 1 foot of sea level rise, as notified by NOAA. So it could be because of that, but also because of higher volumetric flow of water coming off the island. It's hard to tell for sure, but likely it's just also boat action as well.
You just mentioned 20 acres worth of marsh loss. Do we have a rough idea or a good idea of how much marsh we actually do have on the island currently?
Yes, generally, I know that we have about 3,500 acres of marsh. I can get an exact figure.
That's close enough.
Yeah.
Lee, in the case of the beach, post hurricane, we make man-made investments and we have beach renourishment and et cetera. In this particular case, as you were saying to Dr. Parker, with healthy or some sections being healthier, is there a man-made solution? Is there, I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things we're gonna do, and I can talk a little bit more about it
okay,
when we get into it, but it's, looking into restoration projects that not only incorporate things like oyster reef restorations, marsh
Mhm.
restoration, but also looking into ways to use sort of these mixture methods, gray-green infrastructure, using things like revetments along with shoreline restoration, and in order to, create more marshes and kind of bolster this natural infrastructure.
wow,
One thing that I've come upon recently is the fact that, marshes, they have this property value attached to them, but they also have an ecosystem services value. And some scientists place it around $194,000 per hectare per year in ecosystem services. And for Kiowa Island, that would roughly translate to about $300 million per year.
Oh,
you
in
lost me,
ecosystem
let,
services.
go back through that calculation again.
Yeah.
So there's what?
Yes. So the ecosystem services provided by the marshes,
Okay.
things like shoreline protection,
Okay.
the storm surge protection, and also the cycling of nutrients. They provide some sort of value at the end of it that, if we try to do as humans, that's how much it would cost. The marshes just in the Kiowa Island area, if you calculated it, around 3,500. It would be calculated, use $75,000 per acre roughly, and you calculate it based on the acreage we have, it would be about $300 million per year.
If, that's saying if we had to go back, if we had to create 3,500 additional acres of marsh, then it would cost 300. If we lost the 3,500 that we have, the 3,500 that we have for a healthy ecosystem that you all believe, how much marsh would an island like Kiowa, how much should we have?
That is what it has now.
Okay.
I think with the marsh being where it is right now, it provides the optimal amount of protection. It's good to keep building onto that in order to enhance that protection. But losing that marsh would whittle away at those services that it does provide.
Okay.
So being able to protect it, to fortify it is very important. And it does provide a lot of that storm surge protection, which really bolsters that number up quite a bit. One of the things that, and I'm glad y'all mentioned that, so one of the things we want to do with this information is being able to find out what sorts of restoration projects could potentially work in these areas. One of the things that's coming out of Carteret County, North Carolina, this is Morehead City, they came up with a map that looks at where you could put potential shoreline projects that would work. So some things like if you wanted to put, a project next to the bridge that goes from Morehead City to Atlantic Beach, it would probably be better to use hybrid sort of techniques such as marsh sills. Marsh sills, there's sort of this, you put in a row of granite blocks out in the marsh, and then you fill it in with sand, and then you put plants in it. And that allows that protection of the marsh behind it, and sort of has this dual benefit of having that gray infrastructure protecting the marsh, but also that green infrastructure behind it to provide those ecosystem services. And this allows us to look at what types of projects will work in specific areas to target what we would potentially look at whenever we're going to look to protect a community or a specific neighborhood, that sort of thing.
Lee, do you know, in that community, is that done by ordinance or is that done by pressure? They just encourage the development, is that an actual, that's the way you have to build things?
This is more of a suggestion about what would potentially work. So it's recommendations produced by the state officials. I know North Carolina Sea Grant was working on this information back in the day. But it could be put in as a regulatory framework for sure. And this goes into our resilience project. So in 2020, the Conservancy received approval for a proposal we sent to the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation for the Emergency Coastal Resilience Fund. And what we're planning to do is use this monies to do a community project to address barriers to coastal resilience in the area. Not that there's too many barriers here, but we wanted to go ahead and start gathering information from the town, KICA, and all these organizations to look into how we can best approach restoration in the marshes and to protect the marshes. as well as to look into projects on the island to help us, handle stormwater issues, and as well as look at ways we can better treat our water quality on the island. So part of this project is collaborating with our stakeholders and looking into the best options to consider, as well as what would work in these specific situations, and talking with land managers, decision makers. And what we're planning to do is produce documents that allow us to look into specific methods and alternatives that are nature-based, such as these marsh sills, such as the restoration projects and rain gardens, to potentially deploy on the island and use as a way to bolster our natural infrastructure. And this is in a way to protect not only nature, but also the humans who live in these communities. So right now we're working on the first phase. So we've collected documents, and we've been able to interview people, and we're sort of coming towards the end of that, and then we're going to interact with people sort of afterwards, these different stakeholder organizations on the island, and come up with a document that allows people to look at these solutions, look at what could potentially work on the island. And this also incorporates the maps that we've generated here, and to kind of deliberate about them and see what would work for the island.
So, could you go back to that, please? So in the first picture, you have the recommendations. The second one, it's been implemented? Okay, thank you.
And, this is a good example. So this would be an example of, if it just didn't work because of the slope here. What they did was they improved the slope by putting in these coral
Right.
logs to allow for sedimentation in this area, so that marsh grasses could sort of migrate into the area. This is kind of the general ideas. We're taking the information we gather from these projects, looking at site conditions, potential for restoration, sort of funneling that into this project, and looking at potential future restoration projects, and that sort of thing. As mentioned, there's kind of a spectrum of these potential alternatives that we could use. We could use just vegetation, or we can just go all the way to bulkhead, which is currently what's being used in Kiowa, and we can kind of, go between there and try to figure out what works best. In some areas, bulkheads are the only thing that can work, and in some areas that call for marsh restoration, and understanding where those boundaries are and how you fit into those recommendations is going to be something we're going to be looking into as well. And this is sort of what would it look like, if we wanted to go forth and look at how you would plan it out, what it would look like. We're going to come up with designs like this, which were developed by South Carolina Department of Natural Resources in their Living Shorelines document, to look at how you deploy these oyster bag treatments for improving the oyster reefs. So this is sort of what it would look like, and as a potential option for what we're going to include in our document. So, and that's all I had today.
Oh, that was great.
Wow. Lee, how much of this is the town funded? You went way back to, it's predicated or at least initiated by the town's funding. How much of this?
So the first year we had $70,000 allocated for the two projects, and then last year we had 49. So 119.
Right.
Close to 100
119,000.
And that's all of this? That's the young lady you mentioned that her.
Not the resiliency.
Yes, sir.
The resiliency, we're not.
Yeah, the resiliency is mostly coming from federal funds.
Lee, can I ask you a quick question? With regards to, so the town helped, one of the, probably many reasons, but one of the reasons I recall that we had, was really interested in help funding, especially the marsh management study, was that ideally after, is it going to still be after these two phases, and just looking at your resiliency, we will be able to take that data and use it for a marsh management plan that the study wants, that the town wants to do. But we had felt like, and Jim and John Taylor had believed and agreed that really before we can even before we can start this marsh management study, it'd be great to have some data to hand over to a consultant. So essentially, you guys, by funding this, you guys are helping to start that work for us. So at some point, I was guessing maybe next year, but we can talk about really when we'll be ready to kind of start that process of where we have to submit for an RFP and find a consultant to take that data that you all have done so well for us and be able to put it into a marsh management plan. Was that kind of the idea? Do I have it?
Yes,
Somewhat
correct. And the good thing that, I'm glad you mentioned that. So the person who worked on this set of data for the second phase of the Marsh Vulnerability Report actually helped with the Folly Beach Marsh Management Plan as well.
Oh, okay.
So, our intent was to do that to help the town get information needed for the marsh management plan and sort of kind of take it to another level. So yeah, absolutely.
Just briefly, what's the difference between a marsh management plan and this study? What are we looking for in in doing this, in doing the marsh management plan?
Yes. So, I'm guessing the marsh management plan, this is the marsh management plan, and then the resilience project we're working on, is that the two things?
You're talking about your study and then the town doing a plan. What are the
Yeah.
difference between the two?
Okay, yeah, and the first was just to gather information about the marshes.
And that's what this is.
Yes, yeah, to
Okay.
gather information, look at what's out there and what are potential options to consider, and then sort of using that as a template to put together and consider for the town.
It could be like a plan, like, for instance, the example that they showed in North Carolina, really looking at the land use planning piece of it, to be able to use that data to justify where or different types of models he had talked about, from soft to green to harder scape, that there may be certain areas based on their study, based on the consultant doing a planning study for us, to gather that information and say, okay, from a land planning, land use perspective, this is what the town may consider to put in as deeper, as more regulations.
Interesting.
I mean, the way I understand it, or have historically understood it, is that this is information allow us to target what do we need to do in various areas. So, for example, if I've read the data right, where we've got this high wave action because of all the towing right around there, a bulkhead or some sort of harder scape might be a more reasonable solution rather than trying to do a marsh sill, for example.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, or maybe things like, putting in more oyster reefs.
Yes.
Right.
It just kind of gives us an idea, a recommendation of what works best. And DNR went through, 6 years of studying how these specific types of projects work, and they kind of have a good idea of what works best in specific areas. So it gives us an idea, one, where do we prioritize these efforts, and two, what works in what spots. And I think that's what we're trying to get at for the data we gathered.
Correct.
Any other questions of Lee? Very impressive.
Yeah, it
Very
is.
impressive. What's the frequency? When will we see you again?
I kind of this time I felt like it was time, so I just kind of stay in contact with Lee or Jim and say, okay, do you have any additional information yet to
Okay.
provide? And so I'm guessing we'll probably do something later this fall, because the project for phase 2 is supposed to be completed by the end of this year.
Yes, correct.
So we'll probably have him come back. I'll probably come back in November or, December,
Yeah, absolutely.
one of those
And-
2 meetings.
And one of the things we work with the college is that the person who's working on the marsh vulnerability study, we actually were able to tailor them into the resilience projects and different funding, so they'll be here as well to talk with Nancy if needed.
Great.
Thank you very
Lee.
much.
Right.
Okay. Should we all get our phones out to load up this app?
Okay, so for more than 2 years, the communication team has been working on a town mobile app for the public. Because the market is so saturated with apps, we really wanted it to be something that was worthy, that people would really want to download. So it's taken some time, and we think the final product is going to be really helpful for the public, and I'm excited to show you today. changes to navigation to the App Store if you're a developer before we promote it to the public. And I had hoped they had been available today, but they're not. So I'm going to show it to you in its current state, and then I'll summarize the changes that we've submitted. And just because it is in preview mode, some of the features will not be live, just so you know that. So this is the actual home screen. And you can see that we have the tide and the weather, and if someone hits the info button, it takes you to an intro page about Kiowa Island, kind of tells them all the beach regulations and other island regulations, which is
Nice.
a lot of questions that we get. And then some of the other highlights are the map. So this is the beach map, and these areas that you see highlighted in red and green are actually the leash ordinance. And they can actually, when you're out there, you know, you'll actually be close in on where you're at, you know, based on your GPS location. And on the map, we actually have the vehicle accesses, the boardwalks, and actually I think it's boardwalk 2 that has, one of these boardwalks actually shows on the live version, ramp access
Mm-hmm.
for a wheelchair.
That's good.
And so that is that's gonna be really helpful, I think, for beachgoers.
Yeah.
And some of the other highlights are, we've added a it's essentially a directory of everyone that we would really need to contact on the island. So the idea is that instead of residents or visitors having to remember all these numbers or who do I call, they would say they have a problem on the beach. They would hit beach patrol. It would bring up the number, and it would take them.
Wow.
It would just call. It would just call and go through via the app. And so you can see we've got quite a number of.
Where's the one that just says the mayor?
I was just thinking the same thing.
Yeah. Wait till I put the number down.
Are you targeting this for visitors, residents, or both?
Both.
Okay.
Yes. But I really wanted it to be something that as a resident, you could be
Yeah.
useful for
Sure.
Yeah.
as well. Initially, you can kind of see from the home screen, which is some of the changes that we've submitted that I was gonna go over. It was really kind of targeted a little bit towards the visitor and tourism market. But I think some of the important things like the contacts and the report the issue feature that I'm about to go through is something that needs to be highlighted more than it is. So I will go over those changes in a minute. But let me highlight report an issue. This function will let anyone that has the app downloaded. So let's say that they have a rental property problem. You will pin your location. It takes you to the next screen, which is you can enter in, this is a contact form, your name, your issue, take a picture, submit. And so I think this is gonna be really useful for a lot of people, visitors and residents. And each one of these violations or issues is associated with a contact either here or at the community association or whoever actually handles the issue.
So our code enforcement officials would be the contacts.
Yes,
On some of
whoever we
these,
assign on the
yeah,
back end, and
okay.
we can add to this list, we can take away, we can.
That's great.
It needs really one contact, so like, to be able to CC people is kind of hard on the back end, because the user actually gets a confirmation that they've
That's
submitted
good.
this, and so then it kind of lists multiple email addresses, and it's kind of confusing for them. I don't want them to be needing to contact all these people, but it does let them know that their issue has been reported. Yes, sir.
That's great.
Okay, so let's just say it's 2:30 in the morning and my next door neighbors are making a lot of noise.
Yeah.
Will this be, yeah, exactly. Will this be something that I can use at 2:30 in the morning to contact code
Yes.
the noise people?
Now, nobody will respond probably
Yeah,
until
that's
2:30 in the
the-
morning.
Okay, that's
So
okay.
that's
So I still need to call the gate.
Yes.
Okay.
So the expectation, obviously, behind that is this is not something that,
Okay.
because it's not 20, we don't have, you know, well,
Okay, that's what it
24-hour
is. It's not gonna
service.
bing somewhere and demand immediate reaction.
Depends
Okay.
on the time, yeah.
Well, that,
I mean, it's gonna be delivered to that inbox, but the end,
Mhm.
whoever's managing the problem, if they're not 24/7, it's not gonna.
Got it.
just to that end, aggressive alligator, so if I saw an aggressive alligator, to getting back to Dr. Parker's point, I should still call the gate.
Well, I hope you wouldn't be finding an aggressive alligator at night, because that would be detrimental. But if you're, so let's say you're walking during the day and you see someone at a pond, you know, or,
Yeah.
you know, they're feeding the alligator, something like that, you can actually pin the location, take a picture, and
Okay.
it goes directly to Jim. It sends as quick as an email does. But you're right, there definitely needs to be some education on the front end of
Right.
what the expectations are using something
Right.
like this.
Okay,
Because of our response times, I mean, we're not, you know, because it's not 24/7.
got it.
Now, when you say pin your location, so I see location services is turned on. If I'm walking down the leisure trail, will it show me where I am?
It will,
Okay.
based on the phone's GPS.
Oh, perfect. Okay, cool.
That'll help a lot, because they're
Yeah.
forever getting
Yeah.
lost.
Mhm.
Right.
Because of course Stephanie's using it right now, so it's pending her location being here.
Right,
That's
but-
why it
yeah,
says
but-
Kiowa Seabrook, but yeah, if you're on a
That's
leisure
good.
trail and click, it'll find you.
Yeah.
So, I think that one's gonna be super useful. And some of the others, like, the dine in the second row. Dine.
Will it have a link to Resi?
To who?
Oh.
Oh.
No, but no.
To make
to
a
your
reservation.
point-
Oh.
Let's see. To your point, we have a stay where you can enter in, these are just local right now.
Oh, this will be so
You can
helpful to
enter in,
everybody.
And it'll take you to whatever website or whatever their phone number is. We have these little
That's
profile pages for each one. So, and then the listing, it has all the things, the lodging, dining, recreation, shopping, health and wellness. And so that kind of brings me to, the navigation changes. So what we're gonna keep right now, is we're gonna keep popular, and we're gonna have maps still there, the need to know, which takes you to the list of ordinances and rules, and, wildlife, and then another popular hot topic at the moment. I think Stephanie, we talked about maybe short-term rentals or something like that. And then this second row is going to, the subheading is gonna go from explore to resources. And it will be replaced with contacts, report an issue, and news, which is our news, takes you to our website. And then the third row is actually, we're gonna consolidate all of the visitor information. Plan will actually go to, the subheading will be stay and play, and it will have stay, which is all the accommodations, explore, which will be the listing of all of the things, because this incorporates all of those. And then events, which is actually ours.
Good.
Now, are these just town-sponsored events, or is that anything, if Fresh Fields is having their movie night or whatever?
Sure, so, no, this would just go to our events. There
Okay.
isn't any one place where it consolidates all of the island's events. There would be nice if there was a community calendar, and maybe, but see, even the community association's community calendar doesn't incorporate all of the resorts events, so it's kind of, that would be a major undertaking for one entity to do, I think. And so there's not really one place to funnel it to actually encompass everything. So right now it is to our events.
So, excuse me, Stephanie, that was contact, report an issue, and what was the third?
News,
News, thank you.
and so actually, the news was just where I showed you when it goes to our news page.
Right.
And like
That's good.
And I think that is pretty much all of the highlights. I'm happy to send out everybody whenever the changes take place. It will look a little bit different, but,
It's gonna be great.
And right now, it's only for,
correct. It's only for Apple, so it's only iSIM.
And how will we promote the existence of this? Just have it parked out there in the App Store, or is there?
That's correct, and then we'll make an announcement to let people know that it's out there. And then, via e-blast, I'd like to do that as, at the end, at like mid-June, and then announce it in our newsletter on the front page. And then, also help with the, get Kika and everyone else to kind of.
On our website, have it
Mhm.
download the app thing?
Yeah.
So when are you going live?
Well, so as pending these changes, it will technically go live after those changes. And then it's really more about us promoting and announcing it to the public.
it'll go live probably, hoping mid-June, mid this month,
Right.
it'll go live.
This is really a precursor to the website then, isn't it? I mean, this is, you're getting all of the foundation, okay.
So if you all have any suggested comments or changes, please send them to Stephanie.
Well, can
um,
we see it?
for
Can we
consideration.
download this on our phone now to see what?
If you have
Uh-huh.
an iPhone, yes,
Yeah.
or a tablet, or your, like an iPad,
I
yes.
think it's at Town of Kiowa Island.
Town of Keel Island.
Go to the App Store,
It has the script logo, you'll be able to identify
go to the
it.
App
Okay.
Store, and you should be able to find it.
And then
So
it'll
just-
automatically upgrade when it,
Just so you, yeah, so once you download it, if you download it now, when they make the changes, the next time you go in it, it might say something like it needs to
Be
refresh
updated.
or
Okay.
something like
Mhm.
that, so. you
Just
can
like your
do
normal
that.
apps, when they, as changes are
It's a
made,
new
it'll
version.
automatically update it.
Okay. That's good.
very cool.
Terrific.
Yeah, but yeah, if you guys think of anything, I looked at it once, but Stephanie and Sir Keely are looking at this all the time, please I gave my suggestions, but, if you guys have anything, I know the question came up about 24-hour, and I think we also talked about having a note, so once it notifies someone that we received their,
Yeah, and
concern.
there's the confirmation, and we can tailor that message to say, it's not intended to be a big, long,
right,
but there is room to clarify, that your issue has been reported,
Cool.
and either if
If
further
it-
information is needed, you will be contacted.
Or do
Just
we-
so that they know that we're not necessarily,
Acting right then.
well, just even to let them know they might not get a follow-up, right? 'Cause
Right.
it might not be appropriate,
And I don't know if
whatever
we-
the instance is.
did we add something, maybe we just talked about it was too long, that if it's an emergency to contact 911 or something, or
Yes,
Gate or
yes.
something like that, we added that in case it is an emergency and people think that we're watching this
Right.
app constantly,
Right.
want them to know if it's an
Yeah,
emergency to
that's-
please.
that's-
You gotta, yeah.
You know, it's interesting, one of the key things I'm learning, we're all learning this stuff, is not to have too many steps to get someplace. The Kiowa Island Club recently updated their website. It used to take 3 steps to get a tea time. It now takes 10.
Yes.
That is not
Oh,
working
my.
forward. That's
No,
moving us
it's not.
backwards.
They went backward.
And I just wonder who's doing their work.
I think you need an in-service. I can do it too.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to look at it.
But to your point, Phil,
But I think the average person can't do it.
Yeah.
reducing
Now, if
clicks
you're
is
taking,
the goal.
that sort of stuff,
Doing what?
going through the bottom, all that sort of stuff, then maybe so, but I'm just getting to the point where I can get a key in.
You identify
Anyway, we
yourself
talked.
before you try to.
This is
make a
inside
picture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Is there any other questions?
no,
But
great.
anyways, feel free to email me if you see something that is missing or suggestions, or if you have any, comments beforehand.
Great job.
Wonderful job.
This
Very
is neat.
nice
This is
job,
pretty cool.
Very
And
nice job.
thank you, Keely's also been.
And
a huge
Keely.
help.
Oh, y'all done a remarkable good job.
Always. So is the
Very good.
team. It's nice, isn't it? Yeah.
Very cool.
2 great presentations, thank you. Now to the business of business. Old business. So we are considering approval of, this is under tab 4.
Right.
And this is the second and final reading of our 2021-2022 budget. So we have had the first reading, we've had the public hearing, We've had, previous to that, we've had presentations by Daruda. Could I have a motion to approve, please?
I make that motion.
And I second that motion.
Okay. Any discussion? Daruda's here with us, Stephanie's here. Any questions or discussion relative to it at all? Okay, hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
We have a budget. And under tab 5 is a proposal, and Brian is here with us also. We had a rather extensive conversation about this at the Ways and Means Committee. There were some comments, suggestions made relative to the language of the contract itself, and they've been incorporated, and Stephanie had sent out a memo to all of us that had in it what possible continued exposures we would have relative to ongoing maintenance. And so could I have a motion to approve, please?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, any further discussion relative to this?
Just one.
Yeah, I got one
We were
too.
gonna look at the rates and see if they were comparable to what we're currently paying, and did we do
It
that?
would be Mr. Gottschalk.
Brian?
Yes, well, real quickly, we did did some research, and their rates are completely on par with what's competitive, on the market today.
Okay.
So that is anything to worry about. Yes, Dr. Parker.
Okay, so I did the mathematics I learned in the 5th grade, and this 7-month contract comes out, adding in the additional anticipated billables outside of that, comes out to an annualized contract of $159,500. Is that comparable to what we've been paying our previous contractor?
Yes,
Okay,
a little bit under.
okay. Thank you, that's it.
Two steps to make a tea time, able to do mathematics, arithmetic, I mean,
I owe an awful lot to
I
Father.
mean. Thank you, Dr. Porter. Motion to approve, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we got a contract. And Brian, it looks great, and I haven't seen a truck ran over it, or the buses came pretty close to a couple of,
Yeah. There's
Couple of
one
areas.
spot where
yeah,
But you know, that grass
I
where
was
that one
pleasantly
spot, it's already
surprised
coming back.
with
Yeah.
the minimal
It's already
disruption
greened up.
on the buses.
Where they made that big gash in on the curve,
yeah, it has green.
it looks better.
And I have noted, even coming over here today, there's always been somebody out there working on it.
Mhm.
You know, pulling the weeds or doing something.
Yeah.
So they're on top of things, which is wonderful.
very good, yep, I agree. Stephanie, your report?
I just have a couple things I asked staff to give some updates. Stephanie or Brian, whoever wants to go first. Stephanie, go first. And what Stephanie's gonna do is that, the former mayor used to do these updates, I don't know, quarterly or every other month, but I felt like, since it's out of Stephanie's department, it'd be good for her to be able to present these to you maybe quarterly, and so she's gonna give you the updates for the first 6 months.
Wonderful.
Just brief updates. So in March, the town issued 9 e-blasts, 2 of which are our regularly scheduled ones, which are bi-weekly. April, we published town notes, quarter 2 town notes. In April, we published 6 e-blasts, 2 of which were regular. May, 6 as well, 2 of which were regular. And then the quarter 3 town notes will publish the second week of July. I think all of you should have received the outline on Friday. And when town notes publishes, it publishes digitally, so that the majority of our readers do read it online. But we distribute it via e-blast, and then that's the digital edition. And then the residents that are signed up to receive the print edition get the mail issue, which is there's about a week in between for our printers and mail and deliver. So that's all they have.
And they're all such high quality.
Yeah, we just kind of do a communication plan update for you all. So if you have any
Great, thank you.
questions.
Stephanie,
What-
you mentioned e-blast, you had told me, that you wished more people signed up for e-blast. Are they?
Yes, so we get about, every time we send out an e-blast, you'll have sign ups and then some people that, opt out. But I think we're roughly up to, last time I looked, it was like 10,000.
Oh, that's good.
Is that,
Now, those are in different categories. Some of them readership.
And I
of
think, to add to that, I think what we would like to see is, we have a great number of people, but I think people get confused because they think that we have all the property owners. We don't, and that's what I would like to see, that number actually go up, because our e-blast captures anyone. It could be someone who came here to visit for a week and they decided to sign up for our e-blast. So if there's, during the emergency events, if there's something else that we really need to do, Stephanie has a good relationship with her counterpart at Kika. We're able to get the list, but we promise to only use it for that purpose, and then typically we destroy the list. So our communication doesn't necessarily hit all the property owners. That's the one thing from a property owner perspective, because they'll be like, they may say, I may notice them on IKEA, they may like, well, didn't you see it? And of course they did if they're not signed up to the towns, but then they're like, well, we're signed up, and they don't realize they just have Kika, and we don't have access to that list.
What percentage of the town notes still go out on paper relative to the digital versions?
Well, there's about 4,000 subscribers that still receive the, and that includes the merchants on Freshfields also receive it. So, it's difficult to manage print, I mean, and to gauge it. You're not really sure, do they end up in the trash can? Do they end up with people sitting down and reading it? Do they just scan? I think, we're all in every edition. We're like, if you'd rather see it digitally, please let us know. And we have people come on and off of it all the time. But I think in general, with digital going the way it is and everything moving online, it's really, really hard to be able to report on print and the reach. So, it is something that, you know, it's quarterly. I think we do a good job of summarizing what happened and what's to come. And I mean, it's a good effort to have something in print. I think that it was a lot easier back in the days when everyone had a lot of room and space, like the Sandcastle used to have it out and things like that, where people could grab it. But a lot of those opportunities have diminished over the years, because it starts to look junky as somewhere that you come in, one person's put something, and then they kind of feel like they have to, you know,
Remove it.
right.
Pretty soon you
So-
have 100 business cards.
Yeah, they'll feel like they accommodate other people.
So, we have discussed putting it at Freshfields and getting a, kind of like a distribution outlet there, and I haven't proceeded with that effort just yet, but it is a good way to get it out there for someone to grab. So. And Kika does several times a year for us, promote our list and tell people to sign up, and often reports on our efforts and things that need to go out to the public and the property owners. So, you know, I think that we're doing a good job. I just think
You've also encouraged people to sign up, so
that's right.
you're doing everything you can.
Yeah. The only other thing that is a potential opportunity would be to mail something to the voter registration list. That might get some of the people that are not actually, but again, they have to actually make that step. It's not like with Kika, when they become a member, they have to give you their email address, so it's a little bit of a forced, you know, commitment versus us. We have to ask them to sign up. They have to prompt. You know, I can make it available to them, but they have to actually want to.
And that would only be the people that live here
Correct.
full-time, so it wouldn't be the part-time
Right.
property owners.
Thank you, Stephanie, it's very helpful.
And,
Please come back again.
and we have Brian. I asked him to give you all an update on the projects that we have going on. So we have still a number of projects that are going on here for the town.
That's right. We've got 3 open projects in the Public Works Department right now. First one, the garage transformation. We're gonna, as you guys know, we're putting an office down there for the wildlife department, so Jim and Aaron will have a more comfortable place to work in there. We've gone through the conceptual design from the architect, and we're putting in our ideas and what's going to be conducive to work life out there. So we've got another meeting with the architect on Thursday. It'll be via Zoom, and he's going to give us a progress report on the structural drawings and some of the other things that we brought up to him pertaining to the car wash station and where that's gonna be located and how we're gonna fix the drainage issue that's underneath the current car wash station right now as that water puddles up against the wall. So there won't necessarily be a deliverable from this meeting, but we're gonna get a progress report, and then we're gonna be having, I think, weekly meetings with the architect at this point until we have exhausted everything that's expected of him. Any questions about the?
Yeah, just before we move on to that, so a couple things with regards to the project. Once we get to the point, because of course, this is not yet officially approved by you all, so it's not something that I want you to think that is final. But once Jim and Brian, I've looked at one kind of, they proposed 3 scenarios, and my comment back to them was, let's make sure that we're kind of thoughtful about what we're wanting to do. I said, I don't want us to come back to say we have a $500,000 project for this. So kind of think through what really is necessary. We're still going to have them do as an option kind of the car wash station, because you all may decide not at this time, but only to do the improvements for the potential office. And of course, once they get comfortable with that proposed design and cost, they'll bring it back to council, Ways and Means, to say, okay, this is what we would like to do, this is how it will look, and this is the cost. And then if everyone is comfortable with that, then we'll move forward with, of course, the bidding process. If not, we will have to go back to the drawing board and see what we can do. So we're still at the very beginning stages of trying to finalize something before we bring it back to you all for your consideration.
Very good.
You're keeping an eye, you're burning hours right now with LS3P, so you're keeping an eye on how much time within that feed.
So if there's no other questions about that, we've also got the solid waste center that we're working through right now. The survey, GEL is doing a survey. They've done plenty of surveys for us before. They conducted that and are putting in that information together to survey the land to see what our expansion options look like, and then of course who will need to go contact, although we're pretty confident that it's going to be all on KIU's property. So once we get all the information from the survey, then we'll send that right over to the architect, who will at that point begin designing what the new center will look like, while we're kind of doing the legwork on our end, talking to KIU about the option of expanding the solid waste footprint on that property. And again, the design intent on this is to increase capacity for the amount of solid waste that can be held there, and also just the fluidity of that space. So we're going to be coming back with the equipment size and how this is going to function a lot more smoothly should this project be able to move forward.
Are you gonna also be addressing any potential security concerns out there? Because I know my wife has said that she feels very uncomfortable frequently being out there by herself.
Yes. Well, so right, that the cameras along with some enhanced lighting is going to be something that we'll look into as well. Because and then not only that, but maybe just look at cleaning up that site from, not doing a landscape project by any means, but maybe just thinning it out so it doesn't, look so spooky, especially if you go there after dark. But I think cleaning it up in that way might kind of help people once they get there, maybe not leave stuff on the ground like we've seen in the past, but to make it a little bit more presentable, hopefully the users of that site will see it that way as well.
And just to piggyback on that, for all of you, as you may recall, I think I mentioned this, but I'm not sure. We currently, we have a lease agreement with KIU, parent company, KIU. The agreement was with Kiawood Partners. since Kiowa Partners sold to Southwest, ideally that agreement transferred to Southwest, but we weren't even aware of that until Petra found it, and we found out that, oh, we have a lease agreement. And so I didn't forward that to Becky Dennis, the general manager there, for her to send it to Southwest legal team, which they stated they weren't even aware that we had a lease agreement with them, that we were paying $1 a year to be able to lease. Currently, where we're at right now, we are, our trash cans are on their property. So moving forward, to be able to expand this, once we get the exact dimensions and locations, then I will share that, of course, with the mayor, but then we'll have to send that to Becky Dennis, who will then share that with Southwest to basically get approval to be able to get additional lease area from them. And if they're in agreement with that, then we can, of course, if we decide to move forward, we would then have a long-term lease. So we work with our town attorney to make sure that we have a, you know, a lease agreement with them, and then hopefully, if they agree to it, we'll continue with the same amount that we have been, which is $1 a year, but we'll see.
I'll double the property and pay them too.
We haven't paid the one.
That sounds good.
Yes, ma'am.
Stephanie, I have a question about lighting, and is there RFIS? Yeah. I get several emails. I've gotten several emails about lighting the sign, and I know one's gonna come in here any day now because it still isn't lit. Can you tell me what the status is? This is the.
I think the sign is lit, but the roundabout is not worked. And then the Kiowa, you're not talking about the 2021 sign, you're talking about the main sign.
I am talking about the sign that's in front of the resort sign.
Oh, our first sign.
Just outside the roundabout?
Yes.
So we,
That sign's not.
I'll have to get an update. We got
I
an
took a
electrician.
picture of it in case you need it.
Well, feel free to send that over to me. I'm happy to take a look because
To
we
make
got
sure it's the right sign.
an electrician that was doing work on the roundabout, and I just need to follow up with him. I've told him that he needs to check the roundabout lighting, that sign just outside the roundabout, and then also the main sign up at the main gate.
Right.
So he's been working through that, and of course the PGA slowed him down a little bit, but I'll make sure to get a follow-up.
I know the main
Brian?
sign is working. I did see that
The main sign's
Saturday.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
not
that
about
one's
that
lit.
one.
Okay.
And then
It's-
even the roundabout, when I was over there over the weekend, that was lit.
What,
I-
which one?
I'm just talking about the roundabout. I was saying the roundabout's lit and the main
Okay.
sign's
There's
lit.
a little one,
The first sign is not lit.
Okay, I took a picture in case, because I know there's, you know, to
No, no,
me-
no, I understand. The first sign is not, is
Outside the
ours,
roundabout.
is not lit. We're not talking about, we're not talking about the second sign, but the first sign, when you come off the roundabout, is our sign, and that one was not lit. But the roundabout and the main sign, that was all lit.
Okay.
So the only
I
thing
will
that was
get a
not lit was the
follow-up.
first sign that Mary Ann's talking about.
Okay, I understand now. We have too many signs there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because they say the Seabrook sign is all lighted and it looks wonderful. You can't see a Kiowa sign.
Okay, well, I will be certain to follow up with him
Thank you
after
very
this
much.
meeting
Yeah.
and ask him what the update is on that sign.
And I'm
Because
sorry, the main
that was
sign-
part of the- That was part of the quote that he gave us. back.
Yeah, and I'm
Thank
sorry,
you.
the main sign was not lit, just the roundabout. Because I remember when I went by the main sign this weekend, I looked back and I said, it's still dark, it's not lit.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's,
So-
last night we came in and.
Yeah, the main sign is not lit, the roundabout is lit, and then our first sign is not lit.
Okay.
So we'll,
you think the main sign is not?
it wasn't lit
It
over the
isn't.
weekend,
I know it's not.
because I looked back and thought, oh, it's still
That's
dark.
funny, because he went out and looked at both those,
Mm-hmm.
the electrician.
Not
There
not
was
the one
some-
you were gonna replace. This is the one in the, when you go through the roundabout.
We'll get with you, but right now we have only one thing that's lit and two signs that are not lit.
Okay.
Thank you, Brian.
You're welcome. Thank you for letting me know that. And then the last project we've got open right now is the Beach Walker Drive study. Careful. So, as you guys know, we've got, we're working with Kimley Horn, who is putting together some improvement options for us for Beach Walker Drive, for pedestrian and pedestrian traffic and motorist traffic. So we've got that survey was completed and we got it sent over to Kimley Horn, who gave us back some options for us to look at. And so we're gonna be working, myself, John Taylor, we're putting together a little, just kind of community hearing for the Inlet Cove residents to get their input before we kind of move forward with
Good.
any design and bring that forward to you all. So we've got that kind of conceptual, if you will, on the improvements to the leisure trail, a couple of improvements that, because of that, would lead to some landscaping as well. And then the big part of this is looking at the intersection of Beach Walker and the Keel Island Parkway. That's something that is part of their study, but we'll be working close with Kika as Will Connor from Kika, who's one of their engineers to come up, because they've been looking at it independently, we've been looking at it independently, and just so we can kind of all get our heads at the same place, that we'll be looking at that together too. So again, those designs have come across our desks, and we'll be planning some meetings with the community about those.
And has the consultant, I'm sorry, I missed part of it.
No problem.
Has the consultant finished his or her report?
Yes,
Corn.
they have brought back some pictures
Okay.
with what their improvements would look like for
Thank
us
you.
to look at.
Thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
And just to piggyback on that as well, the community meeting with Inlet Cove that's here, anyone's interested to attend, is June 10th at 2 o'clock.
Could you send that to us?
Yeah, I'll send you an email.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Brian, thank you very much.
Oh, I have one more
Brian.
question.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, go, you go. You got it first. The additional landscaping buffering on the bike path there along the parkway, where do we stand with that?
So we did put in some heavier vegetation there. The cord grass that's going to fill out a lot thicker than the original grass that was there. And we talked about this earlier today with staff, and to prevent putting something there that's going to then obscure vision in a year or 2 years, we feel comfortable with the cord grass to see how that's going to fill out. This can get 5 feet tall and can get 3 feet wide, and it's going to be thicker than the Spartina grass that was there originally. So it should be really filled out by this fall. So we're gonna revisit it then and take a look and see if there's anything additional that we need to
They
do.
told me today to hold tight to the end of this year, because I asked about it, so they said, should look better by December, so I said, okay, we'll revisit if we need to in
Okay.
end of this year.
Frank, I go back to my favorite sign question. Are we gonna now, with the PGA behind us and no time frame in front of us, are we gonna go get bids for the main sign? Since I think it's approved by council, but the question is, since we own two signs that I know of, the little one and the big one, if we're gonna go bid with the sign company and get them to do it, my question is, and I don't know whether we're authorized to do it, why not replace them both at once, because it'll be cheaper if we do them both at once and get it done.
Great idea. I think that
I think there's
Maintain
enough money
consistency.
in what was approved by council to get them both
There
done.
was a lot of money.
I think it could too, and with
27,000.
taking away any rush fees that might have been
Right.
imposed otherwise when we were trying to get it done before the golf tournament. So to answer your question, if that's something that we are still, the council will still like to move forward with, we could revisit that project, and I could open it back up and go get some bids from the same companies that I got in before, and see if there's any other companies out in the area that would be happy to put bids on that as well. I know getting as many signs as we did for the PGA from Fast Signs, every time I went in there, they asked me if we're ready to open that back up, and so they're anxious, and I feel like they would be a pretty competitive bid for that
Yeah,
project.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I thought that was the plan, we were gonna now go.
Yeah, that's the plan.
It,
Yep.
it was always the
Mhm,
plan.
yep. We just added this other sign, but we just
Yeah.
add that in, it's not a problem.
Let's move on. Let's
So if we
move
wanted,
forward.
if we're ready
Yeah.
to start that, then I'm happy to get that ball rolling.
And to that end, everybody feels comfortable with those 12x12s, and that's the pieces, the wood, the
Well,
certificate
yeah, for the main sign.
for the main sign, right?
The little sign is
No,
much
no, no.
smaller.
Okay.
I mean, little ways.
And because we're not rushing this, we'll make
Right.
sure we go through
Yeah,
ARB.
do a competitive, yeah.
And we'll
go
do a
the
competitive
ARB.
bid and we'll go through ARB and make sure everything's done.
Okay.
I'm sorry to bring this sign up again, but is the resort sign lighted in connection with the other sign? In other words, is the electrical plan, does it impact both signs or just the one sign?
It should be hooked up to the same electricity
Right.
that's on the little utility easement, on the other side of the parkway.
Yeah, the one that has PGA or,
Yes, ma'am.
okay,
21 PGA term.
yeah. If it doesn't, could you let the resort know that that sign isn't lighted either?
It is not.
No.
Okay,
It's not
I will
lit.
certainly let
I
you know.
don't know if it's ever lit, I don't know if they still want it lit since the 2021
I don't
PGA is
even know
over,
if-
but yeah, you can
I
check
don't
with
even
them.
know if it
Okay.
was ever
Yeah.
lit, but,
Yeah, I don't know if
Might
it's
as
ever
well
been
check.
lit.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Brian. Anything else?
I have
Stephanie? Council members. John, anything?
No, maybe just an observation that as part of the public works that was always top of mind for everybody. I think that the plantings along the parkway have come in nicely. And just as they told us, they are growing. and they're blooming.
Yeah.
And it,
There's flowers.
and, you know, it looks good.
Looks good. I agree.
No report.
Dan?
The only thing I will mention is roads, and I sent you all my latest update from the county. John's not available today, but we're gonna follow up with the county, see where things are and get in there and find
Right.
out exactly. You know, as the mayor pointed out in his comment back to me, even though the alternative road idea got the most popular votes, that doesn't mean it's the one they're
Right.
gonna follow.
That's right, that's a good point.
But it was clear that the other solutions, other than maybe Bohicket, didn't seem to gather much speed. So that's good in one sense, but that doesn't mean, so we're gonna follow up with them,
Great.
John Taylor is gonna take the lead. We'll keep you posted.
I think that the decision that council, or that the county council will make, will be the most sentinel decision that they will have made probably in their careers as a councilman, to decide which route to take.
Yeah,
And I'm just not certain that 800 people, God bless them all, that responded are gonna sway them one way or another. I mean,
Understand.
this is a big deal. They cut across the island or widen Bohicket or whatever the heck they're gonna do. It is gonna be the biggest deal they'll have made, so. I think learning more about this whole process will continue to be interesting. Scott?
Yeah, I have a couple of things to report out. The Conservancy Board of Trustees met last Tuesday on the 25th, and they heard a presentation from the Clemson and people about the Bobcat study and second-generation rodenticides. That was a very good presentation. After the presenters were excused, there was a very robust discussion amongst the trustees, and at the end of the day, upon motion duly made and seconded, it was unanimously resolved that we strongly affirm and give our support of the Kiowa Island Bobcat study, and we will endeavor to determine the financial support we will provide for the ongoing study, was the resolution that was passed.
very good.
So we don't know how much, but they're committed to it.
Well, they are strongly in support of it. Okay. Then the Environmental Committee met on May the 12th, and the big outcome that came out of there was the Conservancy presented to the Environmental Committee what various projects that they are considering asking the town to be funded for. They asked for obviously more money than was in the budget, but they have got two projects that have to do with monitoring the water and then also monitoring the quality of the water, which ties, I think, very well into the existing study, and we'll add the additional data that Lee has been gathering in terms of the marsh thing. And then the other study that I think was probably the best after that was looking at vegetation under the canopy. Right now, we can't really see what's underneath the canopy, and there's some technology that they have that allow them to use handheld or mount it to portable devices and be able to actually look at the vegetation under the canopy in the marshes and in the maritime forest. And then they also had some funding related to studying minks out in the marshes. We apparently have a unique population of mink on the island. Who knew that we were all mink farmers? So it'll be interesting to see how those priorities get funded and what they want. So there you have it. We have mink. Minks, unique minks.
Wow.
Apparently they don't come in out of the marsh very often, though, is my understanding. So, and that is my report.
Thank you,
Did you
Scott.
have any other
Jim,
questions
while
for
you're
the minutes?
in the
No,
room,
they actually got all answered.
is our researcher on board yet, Megan? Is it her, I think you had said it was her name.
Yes, so Megan has been selected. She will get into town, she'll report to Clemson the weekend of July 4th.
Oh, okay.
And then we have her tentatively scheduled to come talk to council.
Well, very nice.
And I know you wanted to meet with her beforehand, and we'll set that up sometime
We're gonna set a Zoom.
before August, if it's via Zoom or if she comes down
Okay.
prior to that.
Okay, good. Good, good, good. Okay, citizens' comments.
The last time
I
when
know.
you were 38 months later. It's really fitting you're holding this meeting today because 32 years ago today, Tom and I moved to Kiowa full-time.
Wow.
There were about 400 full-time residents. You know, you saw everybody all the time. And obviously, as the population of the island has changed, things that used to work once upon a time don't work anymore. But the one thing, and I think the PGA showed it as the last volunteering project, even though we don't have to pay for volunteering in town, but is that sense of volunteerism that founded the island still thrives.
Oh, yeah.
And that's, from my observation, that's a very, very good thing. Since I'm leaving, I figured I would close my comments with a couple of recommendations. First one, I think I've made already, which is when you guys have your annual retreat, whether it's the 5 of you or other members of successive councils. I've always been very fortunate. I don't think there was ever a retreat I attended where if I had a comment to make or a question to raise, I wasn't given the courtesy of doing so. But there's no place on the agenda for people who do attend to be able to ask questions or make comments. So if you can think about that for future town retreats, I think that will be helpful. Maybe Kika could find it in their hearts to put an icon, a little icon on their homepage to click to get to town notes. I doubt it, but there's nothing to lose by asking, but that certainly would encourage people to go. I mean, they're there, but you can't make people read them. But if they're more as accessible as they possibly can be, perhaps that will make things easier. Other thought I had, again, because you want to do everything you can to encourage people to attend council meetings, to participate in town government. Anybody who's ever attended a county council meeting can attest to how different things are in terms of how the public who attends is encouraged to participate and hear, because it's like night and day. Yes, they have opportunity for citizens' comments, but it's kind of it's there, but they don't really do anything to encourage it, which I feel is the opposite of what happens here, where people really are encouraged to participate. So, one suggestion I'm gonna make, which may not be feasible, but as you think about it, it may trigger something in one or more of your heads for something that would work. And that is that I think there's a vehicle for when property changes hands, that you guys get notice so that people can be told about solid waste collection. Maybe there's a way to use those notices to invite people to come to this building for coffee or whatever, to meet council members and to learn, you know, just the basics of how the town operates and what services are available. Hopefully, if that were, something like that were possible, it might capture a few people who would be willing to volunteer in looking for things to do, and it might make things easier to get volunteers. Just a couple of thoughts. The last thing that I wanted to say was that the person who is taking over soliciting contributions and buying supplies for the teachers at Mount Zion from me is a woman named Lucy Hoover, who lives on Seabrook, and Lucy has been volunteering at Mount Zion for years. So if you get any sort of communication from her and you wonder, why is this person from Seabrook getting in touch with us? That's why. It's been an honor and privilege to attend meetings. I wish more people took advantage of it, because you learn so much, and it makes it so much easier if you do have an idea. Well, they've tried it before and this hasn't worked, maybe it's worth giving it a shot again or whatever, but at least it's not where you just have, as one of my going away presents from friends was a bottle of Wendy Wines, W-H-I-N-S. At least it's not just whining. At least it's offering constructive suggestions for how to make things better. I wish you all well. If you're ever in Cleveland, come visit.
Thank you. Could I have a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved.
Second.
We are adjourned. Thank you. Thank you all for coming.